How does the mother tiger safely manage to ferry all of the 3 cubs across the mountain river without leaving the naughty one alone with a sibling? Hello, I'm Tim Clark, a curator in the Asia department. Welcome to my corner. When I first saw this painting, I didn't know what this subject was. It was only later, when I was talking to a professor in Japan, that he told me it's a classical Chinese subject. It was in fact a Chinese writer called Zhu Mi, who first recorded this subject in a text of the 13th century, the late Sung dynasty in China. So even though this is an ancient Chinese subject, the painting was actually made in Japan in the late 18th century by an artist called Maruyama Okyo. Okyo was a major figure in Japanese painting at the time and revolutionized Japanese painting in some very important ways, some of which are visible in this screen. The first is the sense of deep space in the composition, the sense that the water is actually flowing towards us, taking us into the space of the painting. And another thing is the sense of lively observation of these tigers and their behavior, this sense of naturalism which Okyo brings to his works. We know that Okyo drew from life and encouraged his pupils to do so, and very close sense of observation in which we see a snarling tiger, a tiger carrying its young across the river, and then sitting contentedly on the far bank, licking its paws. But it's quite likely that Okyo never saw a live tiger, because there were no live tigers in Japan. So there's probably a sense in which he's closely observing the behavior of cats and then projecting that onto his grand subject of tigers. But we have no evidence that Okyo, the painter of this screen, actually ever saw a live tiger. What he did see were hundreds of Chinese paintings of tigers. And that takes us back to China as being this great source of cultural reference for people in Japan at the time. Also coming to Japan were tiger skins. And when people look at Japanese paintings of tigers, they often comment on how the heads are sometimes rather flat. And one theory is that artists are often working from flattened out tiger skins rather than the live animals. The fur effect has been built up by having probably a layer of white to start with, then blocking out with a layer of white, then overlaying that with some of the colors, and then finally this very painstaking effect of painting the individual hairs of the fur. So for the stripes of the tiger, for instance, you'd have a black wash forming the shape of the stripe. And then above that, you have very painstaking layering of black hairs, some white hairs, some orange hairs, and even when you look closely, some gold mixed in amongst the fur to add to the sense of luxury. So one of my favorite passages in the painting is where the fur has become wet and matted on the mother's chest as she's crossing the river. And I can't imagine how complicated it was to achieve that effect of the matted fur on the mother's chest. The challenge for the mother tiger is how to get her 3 cubs safely across this fast-flowing mountain river. It's a moment of danger for the family. The additional challenge for the mother is that she knows that one of these tiger cubs, the naughty one, this is the naughty one next to me here, if she leaves it alone with its siblings, it will attack them. So, how does the mother tiger safely manage to ferry all of the 3 cubs across the mountain river without leaving the naughty one alone with a sibling? I'll tell you the answer. She starts by taking the naughty one across the river on its own. She then goes back without a cub, picks up the second cub, carries it across, leaves it, picks up the naughty one again, carries it back, leaves the naughty one on its own, picks up the third cub, carries it across, and then she can go back and get the naughty one. So she's never left the naughty one on its own with the others. Screens like this are very common in large Japanese mansions of the period. We're talking about the 18th century here. And something of this interest would have undoubtedly been used in one of the more public spaces, one of the grand reception rooms, Maybe it was the house of a samurai lord or one of the aristocracy, the imperial court in Kyoto. And when you went into a grand reception room, this would be part of the furniture that was greeting you. A screen like this with a gold leaf background forms a very important function of generating or being the focus of the light in a traditional Japanese interior. If you think of traditional Japanese palace rooms or temple rooms, often you have the shoji paper doors closed. Sometimes beyond that you have the wooden rain shutters closed. So often the interiors can be quite dark. So by using strategically placed pieces of furniture such as the gold leaf screen, you can pick up whatever light there is in the interior and reflect it back off the screen. Then of course after dark, when you start to introduce generally oil lamps into the interior, they too will project light that reflects off the gold screen and becomes the focus of the room. So the screen was acquired by the British Museum in 2006, purchased from a dealer in Japan, and the Art Fund contributed a major grant so that we're able to acquire it. Investigating the provenance of the painting, we found a little collector's seal stuck to the back of the screen, and it turned out to be the collector's seal of a man called Hara Sankei. And Hara Sankei was a wealthy industrialist. He married into a family of silk exporters and became extremely wealthy. And he was collecting major works of Japanese art in the early 20th century. And we can even take the history of the screen back a little bit further. It was reproduced in an art magazine. Actually, a photograph unusually was reproduced in the magazine in 1895. So the definite history of the screen goes right back to 1895, just over a century after the work was painted. I'm always thrilled when I walk through the gallery and see this screen to know that we have such a major work by an important figure in the history of Japanese painting, and one that anybody, no matter where they come from in the world, can relate to. The screen is shown regularly in our Mitsubishi Corporation Japanese galleries at the British Museum, where it's very popular with the public. I'm very proud that we have in the British Museum collection a major work by such an important figure in Japanese art history. And personally, I just enjoy the way in which the tigers engage with us, staring out at us and inviting us into their world.